Welcome to Sounds True's Mindfulness and Meditation Summit. I'm so glad you're joining us. There's never been a more important time for us to commit to our practice of meditation and mindful living for the sake of our families, our communities, and our precious world. This session will remain available for free for 24 hours, and then if you wish, you can also choose to own the entire downloadable series with transcripts of each and every session and bonus gifts from our presenters. This session features an interview with Michael Gervais speaking on Meet Them Where They Sweat, Mindfulness in High-Performance Sports Psychology. Michael Gervais is a published, peer-reviewed author and recognized speaker on optimal human performance, who has been featured on CNN, The Wall Street Journal, ESPN, NBC, the NFL Network, and more. Michael's goal is to unpack and then decode how the greatest performers in the world use their minds to pursue the boundaries of human potential. His roster includes an MVP from every major sport, internationally acclaimed artists and musicians, and Fortune 100 CEOs. My name's Tammy Simon, and I'll be your host for this special interview. And now, let's get right to it. Michael, welcome to the Mindfulness and Meditation Summit. I'm so glad you could join us on this day that we've dedicated to exploring mindfulness in creativity and performance. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to this conversation, so thank you.
All right, this is going to be an interview between us, and I'm really looking forward to it too. To begin with, and this is something I don't know about you, how were you first introduced to mindfulness and meditation?
Yeah, it goes way back. It was a mentor of mine. And when I was younger, about 20 years ago, I needed a mentor. And, he tried a lot of different ways to help me. And some worked, some didn't. And one of the things that he, was adamant about was me figuring out how to be quiet and listen to myself. And, it sounds so esoteric as for a 20-some-year-old. And I was ripping and running and trying to figure out life and looking for adventure everywhere I could. And then he pulled me aside one day and had a more serious conversation. And he said, I'm going to say something to you that could be shocking. I said, okay. And he said, I'm not sure exactly how to reach you on this, but I'm trying. But this is what I want to tell you about mindfulness, is that when you get it right, it could be a full body orgasm for you.
Wow.
I said, what are we talking about? And so that was the first introduction. He used kind of a different angle to get in. And so, I've always been interested in ancient traditions. I've always been interested in the wisdoms of the world. And then he kind of finally got my interest. And I said, okay, listen, I'll try it. And that's how it started for me. I was kicking and screaming a little bit about it because it felt soft. It felt like there was something that I didn't have time for. And that was my first entry into it. And then I was introduced to it, I think like many people, and then didn't practice it. And then quietly practice it here and there, especially during moments of perceived stress in my life. And then over time, I started to feel what I would call the gold dust of mindfulness training. And I said, oh, this is it's an accidental benefit that I'm finding about being more centered, more grounded, more accidentally relaxed. And then I felt like I grabbed a lion by the tail and went along for the ride.
Now, you said something very interesting there, the gold dust. What do you mean by that? That's the quality of being calm and centered and grounded?
Well, yeah. So, okay, if the gold dust is not quite the gold, but there's gold dust and there's sprinkles and hints that you're onto something. And for me, it was a quieting and a centering of my mind, being more focused in the present moment, as we would like to describe it. But as a 20-some-year-old, I just felt like I was able to be a bit more focused. I mean, I don't know another way to say it. And I was like, God, this is really good. And it's helping me in sport. It's helping me in life. It's helping me in relationships and studying as well. And so I was first introduced through the performance lens. And but we do no, we don't do service to what mindfulness is if we just stop with performance. And so, but that was my first introduction into it through the performance lens.
Mm-hmm. Now, as a sports psychologist, a high performance psychologist, you work with elite athletes, many different kinds. And I'm wondering, what frame do you use when you're introducing them to mindfulness? It's probably not the full body orgasm language. What language and framework do you use?
Yeah, great. You know what I love about the training of mindfulness is that there's many ways in. And a saying that has been, I think, very helpful for me working with elite performers or world-class performers in a variety of domains is meet them where they sweat. And we all have a place we sweat. Some of us, it's, in boardrooms, and some of it's in, obviously in the more concrete with athletes. But the concept is really about understand where a person is on their journey and meet them right there the best we can. And so sometimes it's about performance. That's the first entryway in. Sometimes it's a secular science approach. Sometimes it's a spiritual approach. So it's understanding where the person is. And it's easy for me to talk about performance because there are benefits. There are performance benefits from being able to be mindful and then also train the skills of mindfulness. That's not always the entry point in. Some people are looking for something much deeper. And so therein lies a second or third entry point in.
Okay, so whatever the entry point is, now you're working with an elite athlete and you're introducing them to mindfulness. You're teaching them this skill. How do you do it? What do you actually teach them?
The teaching part or the getting their head around what it is? There's a couple phases, I think, of mindfulness. I'm interested
in both of those, and I'm also interested in the actual practice, now let's start working together.
Okay, so let's skip through it, and then let's assume that the athlete is saying, yeah, okay, good, let's go. The first thing that I make sure that we understand is that conceptually what mindfulness is, and then when we get to the application of training, it's pretty simple. It's almost mechanical, and I've organized it in my head, and I'm not sure what if you would agree with this or not, this approach, but that there's two basic types of mindfulness. There's single point focus, and then there's a contemplative practice. And so single point focus is a relentless and uncommon, a disciplined approach to following one thing for an extended period of time. And so it could be a breath, a flickering candle, a dot on the wall, a mantra. It could be a lot of different things. But let's just use breathing for the example here, and then when the mind wanders, you gently bring it back. So to what? Maybe it's the inhale or maybe it's the exhale. So conceptually, people will nod their head and say, okay. And I think the first order of business is to help them understand what do you mean by refocusing? And what do you mean by when my mind wanders? Aren't I supposed to try to keep it from not having thoughts? So there's a lot of misguided thoughts or expectations about what the actual doing of mindfulness is. And so we kind of demystify that a little bit, make it as mechanical as I possibly can, and then walk them through almost like a three-phased approach is my entry in. So just close the mental files, get into your body, be here wherever you are, close the mental files in the background that are running, all the stuff that you're supposed to be paying attention to, that you need to pay attention to, but isn't here right now with us. And then close those files, settle into your body. Let's focus on some breathing. And I just have the exhale be longer than the inhale. And then I teach them the mechanics of a full deep breath, starting in the, down by the lower lungs and then bringing it up. And then after that, we move into some progressive relaxation where, athletes are very attuned to their body. So that's a natural point for us to begin. And we just do a progressive relaxation, walk through all the different parts of the body, have them be warm and heavy. And then at that point, I'm reminding them to stay sharp, as if a loved one depends on you getting the next breath right. And so that razor's edge of mindfulness is very important for me. And it's very important for them as well, because many of the performers I work with their job is in very hostile or rugged environments. And there's very little luxury for hesitation. And when people at the tip of the arrow in rugged and hostile environments hesitate, they get hurt or their loved ones get hurt. So we need to help people have great command of their craft and great command of their mind as well as great command of their body. So we work from this progressive relaxation technique, but that it is not a relaxation strategy by any means. That is maybe a second way to think of gold dust. It is a focus strategy to help them understand the quality of their mind, to control their own mind, when their mind wanders away from the most important element or task at hand, how to quickly refocus and bring it back. So focusing is a decision, whether you're born with ADD or some other, disordered way of attending, or not. It is a decision, and then the skill is a refocus. So we train the skill of refocus relentlessly and uncommonly so. And then I'll move into, maybe I'll bridge in some sort of gratitude training at the end. And what I like to do is, so that for me, those are the building blocks, the three main pillars for single point. And then once they get more comfortable and familiar and they understand how to take the training wheels off and they don't need somebody to guide them through it, then we will maybe stitch in some imagery, performance imagery, but I like to actually separate those to not confuse a mechanical refocusing training skill with seeing performance success. But some athletes like that. The third thing that we'll do is we'll hook them up to either EEG or heart rate variability monitors so that they can get actual tangible feedback about the impact they're having with their heart rate variability, the quality of their alpha versus beta versus theta brainwaves. And because a lot of people in the performance world like to have objective feedback that they can measure success with. While that might not be common in the traditions of spiritual enlightenment and wisdoms, that is something that is a tool that the population I work with, they like it. And so at some point, it's part of the middle part of the conversation, right? So entry point is, I'll guide them through something, see if they can spend some time on their own to do it. Maybe we attach some scientific feedback. And then the third part is moving them over to contemplative approaches.
And can you give us a sense about the contemplative approaches and what you mean by that?
It's funny because I know you know the answer, but
I want to know how you present it, and particularly how you present it to elite athletes.
Yeah. And, I'll explain that in a second, but I just want to put one thing, make something more clear in our conversation. Sure. Is that elite athletes are fantastic, but let's not put them on a pedestal as these amazing people. They're just like you and me. They have the same challenges, the same struggles, the same dreams and hopes. But what they are extraordinary at is dedicating a disciplined approach to training their craft, their body, and their mind. And so they become this fantastic subgroup and subpopulation of people that are absolutely extraordinary at a disciplined approach to improvement. And as humans, there's only three things that we can train. And everything in my lenses falls in those three things about human improvement. You can train your craft, and most people spend so much time on their craft. And we all have, there's so many different crafts. And the craft doesn't mean the thing that you're paid for. It can be that. It's pretty fortunate when your primary passionate craft also earns an income. That's wonderful, but it doesn't have to be. If you've got a 9-to-5 job, your craft could be parenting. So you can train your craft, you can train your body, and you can train your mind. That's it. And I would put an asterisk next to you can train your spirit. And I put an asterisk next to it because I want to leave space for it. I think that it's possible. I don't know any research. I understand the beauty of the ancient traditions and the religions of the world that would say, of course you can train your spirit. But that's a tougher conversation to have. Not a bad conversation, but it's a tougher conversation for many people. So I start there. And then as we get into the contemplative approaches, it's as simple as reminding people that what we're going to do in this next phase is just watch your thoughts without judgment, without critique. Just watch the stitching of your thoughts. And we call it trains of thought, right, for a reason. That when we get on a train, there's lots of stops along the way, and each stop represents, in this metaphor, a thought. So let's just watch the train of thought that you're on. Let's watch how those thoughts change and shift and move from one to another. And then we challenge them to pay attention to the stitching between the thoughts, the linking between the thoughts. And then we encourage them to pay attention, go in between the thoughts to understand that space between the thoughts. Why does an elephant remind you of a certain person? Why does a cheetah remind you of another person? I'm just making those up as we go, but so there's just an observation of where your mind naturally wants to go. And, some of the more ancient or traditional ways is start with a primer like, who am I? And get people started down that path. But, so there's lots of ways, but it is really just creating as much space as we can between the observer and the thoughts and allowing us to just watch the thoughts. And I have not met a world-class athlete, and when I say world-class, I mean like tip of the arrow, world-leading athlete or coach that doesn't nod their head to say, the inner game is really important. The mental part of the game is very important. And that being said, that not everybody knows how to train it.
Now, one more question just about this basic training framework that you're presenting. Under the concentration style practices, the third one you mentioned was gratitude. And I thought, that's curious that you would pick that. You could have picked loving kindness. You could have picked other ways to bring ourselves into some emotional place of warmth and relaxation. Why gratitude?
Well, I think that it's a powerful reminder that we're together. And so when we do the gratitude training, we start with being grateful for the work that you've put in to invest in yourself. So we use an approach like a pebble in a pond and creating ripples. So be grateful for the work that you invested in your own life. Now be grateful for the people around you and how they're contributing to your well-being and how you're contributing to their well-being. And so that's one reason, because it helps bind us and keep us connected. It opens up a different part of our brain. And many alpha competitors are intense about dominating and wanting to be better than others. And we have to remind all of us, that it's really important that we don't get to sharpen our sword without other people that are highly skilled. So let's also be grateful for them, meaning our traditional view of competitors is not quite right. And so that's one reason. The second reason is because the research that I've been exploring around gratitude is that it precedes joy and happiness. And so that's a phenomenal idea to me. And I'm not going to say that, put my kind of fist on the table and say I know exactly, or we know exactly the brain centers that are preceding joy and happiness, but that caught my attention. And so that's one of the reasons I start there as well.
Now, Michael, behind you right now is a football field. Are you actually training football players right now, as we're recording this broadcast, in what you just described? Is this happening here with football players in real time?
Yeah. Well, not actually right this minute, but yes. Yeah. The Seattle Seahawks organization, our progressive organization, the culture begins and really ends with Coach Carroll's relentless approach to create something that is very special here. And he is really open and interested and understands the value of the inner experience and how powerful and important that is. And so there's nothing here that's mandatory. It is meant to be a resource. And I would say that mindfulness is a part of a mental training or mindset training program. It is an important part, but there's also other mental skills that we need to sharpen and refine. And mindfulness does help to increase the awareness of our inner experience. And I know that this might not be popular for this conversation, but mindfulness alone in these rugged environments that we work on or work in, or in hostile environments sometimes, it is not enough.
Sure.
It is important, but it is not enough. And so we do need a full suite of tools and skills and strategies to help people become more grounded and to be able to access their craft in any environment. And I think that is the really important nuance that we're trying to figure out, and why mindfulness is a center hub, why it is a center pillar of the approach. is to help people be able to access the craft that they've spent so much time dedicated to be able to maybe even master, that they can access it in any environment.
Mm-hmm. Now, Michael, I have so many questions for you, but I'm, of course, going to feel the dust and go calmly and one at a time here. But you also introduced this idea of performance imagery and how we can bring that into our inner reflections. And I wanted to hear more about that because I've heard different things that, visualizing ourselves running at some speed or something like that doesn't really work. Does it work? Performance imagery?
Yeah. I mean, I think that the science would suggest otherwise, that there are, good science is going to debate on two sides of any, thought that we're trying to better understand or practice. But yes, the body of science and the body of work around performance imagery is pretty significant. And I don't think that any of us have to work much harder than knowing when we get really clear on a particular thought and eyes open or eyes closed, and we imagine that thing in the future or the past, we feel something. Just thinking about an upcoming event of public speaking can get people's heart to thump. And it's not for 24 hours, 48 hours. And why is that? Because we use our mind to create an image that feels lifelike. All five senses are involved. And our mind sends these signals to the brain that says, hey, I think we got to turn on. And our heart starts to thump, and we start to, the skin conductance turns on, and our digestive system turns on, and we get the butterflies or nauseous or something. So that we have ample testimonial experiences within our own lives to say that when I think of something richly and deeply, I feel a physiological response to it. So we're just taking that insight. This is where the science came from, like what is actually happening. And in an odd way, let me take a weird turn, is that in many parts is what the porn industry is built on, is that they have these sensational, sensual images that people view, and then they see those images even after they turn off their computers, and they're so vivid and so lifelike because they've looked at it for so long that it actually changes their brain. It's easier to conjure up those images than images of something else, something maybe that you would hope that they would think about, wisdom or beauty or gratitude or joy or hope. Not to say that they're not compatible, but it's a competing resource certainly. And so the reason I bring that kind of weird turn up is because when all of us were younger and we were first exposed to a sensual image, is that when we would close our eyes and imagine that sensual image, our body would feel something as well. And so and our body would literally change. And so there's a real historical story, if you're honest with yourself, about how imagery works for the positive and negative in one's own life. And then the science backs it up by saying, when I close my eyes, we can and I see with great detail how I want to be or what I want to do in the future, that it impacts myelinization. And myelinization is that process of where fat binds to the nervous system and across the nerves in our body. The more myelinization across particular nervous cells, the faster and more efficient those nerves fire and wire together. So, there's a lot I could go on and on. It helps confidence. It helps neurological patterning. And so, yeah, it's a great skill. And it's hard. It's difficult, and it requires a disciplined, focused mind as a prerequisite to see extraordinary success in the future.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, this brings me to the next big thing I want to talk about, which is, from a sports psychologist viewpoint, what happens when we choke? So someone in preparation could do a lot of performance imagery. They could even do a lot of mindfulness training. And you said, mindfulness is a hub of training that you work with, but it's not in and of itself enough. What happens when right there in a critical moment we choke, even though we've seen the imagery of our success?
Yeah. And what's interesting is that, so there's some stages to choking. I'll explain those in a minute. But what's interesting to your point about mindfulness not being enough, is that awareness alone is not enough. Because if you're aware that your heart is pounding and your hands are sweating and you're about to go have a conversation with somebody that feels threatening, just the awareness is not enough. Like having some skills to know how to say hello and goodbye, the refocusing, that's important, but also having a way to externalize or front load why you have the right to do something difficult. And so confidence comes from what we say to ourselves. It doesn't come from preparation. It doesn't come from success, past success. Those are both important. But confidence comes from what we say to ourselves. So we need to know the thoughts that we're going to have, that we want to say to ourselves on a regular basis, program those, water those, help those grow. But if they're not real and you haven't earned the right to say them, and you're about to get punched in the teeth or kicked in the stomach, so, metaphorically or literally in some cases, then those statements don't hold up. We have to be very clear about how we have earned the right to speak to ourselves in certain ways. So I'm taking us down a little bit of a path here that might not be.
I want to get back to that. So we'll circle back, but you can go back to the stages of choking.
Yeah. So the first. So let's go in the most grave sense is choking, and then there's micro choking, and then there is performing under pressure. Then there's performing. Then there's thriving under pressure, and then there's dissolving pressure. Okay. So it is possible to dissolve pressure. It is possible to thrive with pressure, and those two, the separation between those two is enormous. There is a fundamental difference between people that have learned how to dissolve pressure and those who are just working to thrive with it. So go down to your point about choking and micro choking. Choking is really rare. It's a rare state. You often don't see great performers or skilled performers in any domain choke. It's more about micro choking. And the word choking doesn't mean literally they're choking their throat. There is a corollary to their breathing becoming more shallow and moving up, and there's a constriction of muscles around the upper body. That's part of it, but only part of it. The choking, that word really comes from the person choking off access to their craft. So there's a big body of work that lays inside of us, right? Neurologically, for performers, mentally as well. And under duress or pressure, real or perceived danger even, during those moments of risk, when we choke off our access, that is essentially what microchoking is that we're not able to access the full playfulness and the freedom to explore the talent that we have within us.
Okay, so let's say you're working with someone who has a critical micro-choking problem, and they come to you, and they say, help me with this. Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about what that sequence would be like.
So first I need to understand them, and then I need to understand what is really happening for them. And before both of those, I need to understand if they're willing to do the work. And the work is not easy. It's rare. And that's what makes it beautiful, though, right? Is that most people say they want to be great. They say they want to change. They say they want to explore their potential, but they choose otherwise in their actions and their thought patterns. So first we need to understand if they really want to do the work. And that means my experience has been that the reason people change is because of pain. And so I have to understand the orientation of which they're coming from, help them get better in touch with that source of pain, and then say, okay, all right, if you're nodding your head and you say you want to do the work, great. Now I need to understand who you are and who you're working on becoming. And then what I've learned over the years is that people have mired, they've fused who they are with what they do. And there's a cost to early success. And one of those costs is this fusion that I'm talking about. And you can call it identity foreclosure, that if you're extraordinary at something at a young age, it's really easy when everybody else is trying to figure out who they are they punk rock or rock and roll or country, that these early talented people, where their entire community, parents and uncles and teachers and their friends, talk about how exceptional they are at a thing, whatever that thing might be, music or sport, that they fuse their identity for what they do. So the first part of the work is decoupling what they do from who they are. And that can take a long time.
That sounds hard. That sounds hard.
It is hard. And, but I think that is fundamentally the beginning of where freedom begins.
Okay, but we need to talk about that some, because I think in our culture, so much we are what we do. And people ask you, what do you do right away? You know, you're the famous sports psychologist. How even would an individual listening to this confidently, and that's an interesting, because you use that word, that's about what we say to ourselves, but how do we decouple who we are and what we do in a deep way? I mean, I've gone through so much therapy and meditation practice to even get a sense of that.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, but that's the journey of self-discovery. And there's plenty of people listening to us right now saying, well, yeah, I know that to be true. And because they know that the model that many of us were raised with is that we need to do more to be more, that model is broken. And I can give you countless stories of people on the podium at the Olympics crying with their national anthem playing, a medal around their neck, and they get off the podium and the world thinks that they're celebrating, like, oh, I finally did it. And they get off the podium and they say, I'm still freaking miserable. This didn't change me. It's just another couple pounds around my neck. You know, I thought I was going to be different once I won. And so the model to do more, to be more, it does not work. We have to orientate to be more. To be more what? Be more authentically you. Be more present. Be here, now, more often. And that journey of self-discovery can take a long time. But it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to, but it is the only journey we're on. So, you know, that is the journey. So you start now or you started 20 years ago, whatever it is that's the decoupling who you are from what you do is the beginning of that. And the further space you have, the more freedom you have to play. Because what happens for so many people is that as soon as they go, let's say you identify with being smart. And this is one of the reasons why public speaking is so hard for people, is because they're trying to figure out what other people are thinking about them when they're on stage. Right. And it's because their identity is at stake, their identity of being perceived to be smart. Now, so you and I had nothing to do with our intelligence. Like, that was a gift from our family lineage. But if we think that we have to keep that up in some kind of way, and that other people's opinions of our intelligence is actually a piercing into who we are, then we've got problems. And the same is true for the craft. If I'm supposed to be anything other than a man on a journey of self-discovery that is trying to figure things out, I get twisted up. If I'm supposed to be this person that they think I'm supposed to be, it gets really complicated. And so what do we help people do is create as much space as we can between the observer and our thoughts. And now that feels like that's something you'd be really familiar with, is the more time we spend being connected to the observer. What is that? The true essence of who a person is, right? That we are not our thoughts, we are not our body, and we are certainly not the things alone that we do. They are extensions of us. The way that we use our thoughts and our words and our actions are extensions. And I think that, you know, I'm animated right now because I know how hard it is. There's not an easy answer to this question that you're posing, but it is the life work for people to do. Start now. How do you start? One way certainly would be mindfulness. Another way would be writing. Another way would be to have conversations with wise men and wise women. And we have to earn insight and wisdom. You can't just go read it. That's somebody else's insight. You have to earn it. And I think part of that process is the decoupling. The natural effect is the decoupling that I am not what I do.
I'm curious for you, Michael, in your own journey, this decoupling from who you are and what you do. Was there some moments in time or where you really saw that this was important for you as a person?
Yeah, over-identifying with what I did was an early trap for me. Is that, you know, and it's the classic line that happens at cocktail parties or whatever, like, so what do you do? And I felt great about saying what I did, which is sport and performance psychology. And because I love it. I absolutely love it. The craft and the science and the art of it. And Early on, I've had wonderful opportunities to partner with people that are very successful, and so it started to get confusing, probably like 15 years ago, about 5 years into it, and that's where I started to get like unsettled. Like, okay, well, who am I? I'm so much more than that. But why I feel so threatened about as soon as I'm in a conversation and somebody who's really been in the amphitheater of danger and high performance, like, how come I'm starting to feel like maybe I don't know what I really know? And so anytime I get away from, I'm a spiritual man on a journey, trying to figure things out. I love science, and I love partnering with people that are exceptional at what they do and have a care about human nature, that's when I start to get unsettled. So yeah, I feel like it's a constant tension, because that's the story that all of us have to battle, but the freedom on the other side of it is incredible.
Now, I want to circle back to one thing you said. You said confidence comes from what we say to ourselves, and that we can't fake it. We can't just say, I'm the greatest interviewer who ever lived if I don't really feel it all the way through me, or whatever it might be for somebody. So what do you do when you're working with somebody and they have a negative self-talk thing that happens a lot? And that the real truth is that I hear these negative things, you'll always be a screw up. Your father will always, think you could have done more, something like that. How do you help people with some repetitive pattern like that?
Well, we all have them. And so I think that's the first part, is like, you're not alone. And so let's go in and do some inner engineering. Let's go to work. And, if you think about what athletes do, is they're constantly working on upgrading. They're constantly working on growing and getting better. And this is a place that they can get better at. They recognize that the thoughts that restrict me and keep me small and maybe safe, but stuck in some ways, I got to get rid of. I got to figure out how to not have that pattern anymore. So there's a deep appetite. When your mission is clear, or your philosophy in life is clear, and you've got really clear goals in life.
Hello, Andy here, and welcome back for day 8.
You want to experience, you have a very clear sense of the man or woman you're trying to become, and that becomes mission-minded, so to speak. You'll do what it takes to change those thoughts. But the first order of business is to become aware of them. Mindfulness is a great way to become aware of thoughts. Also, writing is a great way to become aware of thoughts. And what we ask people to do is to do we call it front loading. So front load the mental skills training before you're in the amphitheater of risk. And so how do we do that? We ask them so concretely, and this is going to sound, if we're not careful, like a 7th grade conversation, but as concretely as we can, just list down all the effed up thoughts that you have. Just list them. You know them, right? Just get them out of your head, write them down, look at them, and then pick one and go down the list, or pick the first one and go down the list and say, like, is that 100% accurate? If it's not 100% accurate, then there's wiggle room. And it's like the old joke, the old movie line. So you tell me there's a chance. And so 100% is what we're looking for accuracy on those statements. And they're not. My dad's going to be right. That's not 100% right. Or I don't know if it's going to work out. That's not 100% right. So let's say that those are the first 2 steps. The third step would be to write down all the thoughts that let me say this more clearly. This is called like an epic thought list, is what we talk about, is to write down all the thoughts that accompany you being at your best. So what does it sound like? What does it feel like in your head when you're on point? When you are, and on point for you could be, it could be aggressive, or it could be peaceful. Like, this is a part of the self-discovery process, is like, when you're at your best, whatever that means, what does it sound like in your head? And then write those down. And then for each one of those, we ask people to give 3 reasons why you have the right to say that. So if that epic thought is, I can do difficult things, then I've got to be very clear ahead of time. This is the front loading and the externalizing of the inner hard drive of what gives me the right to say that. Because as soon as I start to rattle and my fight, flight, fear, submission, or freeze response kicks on, then I need to say, whoa, hold on. I can do difficult things. You know what? I did A, I did B, I did C. Like, yeah, that's right. Come on, let's go. I can do difficult things. Bring it. And that becomes a whole different way of organizing how I think about myself and how I think about myself in the future. So it's concrete, it's mechanical, there's nothing glamorous about it, but it's like externalize the inner hard drive and then train. So that's the first part, then train those skills. Then train those thoughts. How do you train them? Oh, mindfulness is great. Each time you see this little thought creep up, you say hello and go bye to it. And I'll tell you a quick little story if you'd be interested.
Please.
In it. So there was a world-class volleyball player that I spent some time with. And this is not the one that most people associate with me. This is somebody else. And we were talking about negative thoughts. And she says, oh, you know what? That is my thing. Okay. You're right. It's what I say to myself. Man, I am so hard on myself. And she reminded me that she says things to herself that she would never say to another person because they're too harsh. And if she said those to another person, that they wouldn't want to even hang out with her. But somehow she thinks she can say them to herself. So she calls this her shitbird. Sorry for the language, but this is a quote. Her shitbird. And she said, it's just like this bird squats on my shoulder and it shits all over me. And before I know it, I'm a mess. And, I don't smell right. I don't feel right. I'm all sticky and it's awful. And then she said, over time, as she was practicing becoming more aware of this shitbird, it was like talking shit in her ear, is that she would shoo it off. And she'd just kind of get off before it would have the chance to kind of, get comfortable. And then she said over time, and this is all through her mindfulness practice, she would see that shitbird sitting on the branch on a tree next to her. And she'd talk to it. She said, stay over there. And then over time, what would happen, because it wasn't a comfortable place for the bird to perch anymore, she said, it just feels like that bird just doesn't come around as much. And so that was a kind of a fun little analogy that she created about her process of going from being destructive to all of a sudden it feels like that toothache I had is gone, right? That conversation I was having with myself over time, it just seemed to evaporate.
Mm-hmm. Now, Michael, I am still chewing right here on separating our being from what we do for an elite athlete, someone who's paid actually to win. Like that's what I'm supposed to do is win. And what I'd like to know is how does connecting more to our being and separating out the doing, how does that actually help athletes win?
Mm-hmm. So if we think, so yes, everybody needs to win, whether it's athletic or not. Like there's an invisible handshake in most relationships. And the invisible handshake is like with, let's say, a manager and a director at a company. Yeah. If the manager doesn't do his job well, no matter how friendly they are, yeah. He or she's going to be asked to leave. The same is true in athletics, which is if an athlete doesn't do his job well enough, then he's going to be asked not to come back. Same for coaches, same for me, same for you and I in this conversation. If this is boring for people, we don't get to do this again, right? So there's an invisible handshake. Now, with that handshake, though, that handshake is about outcome, okay? And what's really important about this decoupling is that the outcome is not in my control or your control. The outcome is the byproduct of the process. And that's certainly simple to understand. So the first order to respond to your question is that athletes they need to win, but that's not the focus ever, really. At the Seattle Seahawks, Coach Carroll talks about, well, let me say this better. That is the focus, but that's the focus for the average. So the average person focuses on trying to achieve the outcome. And the extraordinary, the rare, the true high performer person that's on the path of mastery is so engaged in refining a high performing process that's where the real conversation is about. So the decoupling, in another way, is about let go of the outcome. What you do is just the outcome of who you are. You're training to be better. And so let's train to be better in your craft, your body, and your mind. And how do we do that? We've got to push right to the edge of instability as often as we possibly can. And extraordinary athletes push to the edge of instability emotionally, physically, every day. They do it every day. And sometimes they do it through physical means, and other times they do it through vulnerability. And when you get those two things matched up, it's phenomenal outcome. So to answer this more simply, the best way I can is that separating the doing from the being and the becoming is the process. And the doing is the outcome. It's the extension. It's the end of the whip. It's the thing that happens as the elements of mind, body, maybe spirit, and craft come together.
No, it's interesting, this talking about pushing to the edge of instability, and I'm imagining an athlete who pushes themselves to go further. And I think what's so interesting about this conversation is really everything you're saying about elite athletes has to do with each one of us in our life. I think that's the sort of subtext of the entire conversation in a certain way. So what does that mean, pushing to the edge of instability for an ordinary person who, parents, goes to work?
Right now, in this fast-paced, digitally transforming society that we're in, we are working really hard as a human race. People are working really hard right now. And in the corporate world, people are exhausted. Most corporations that I've been fortunate enough to spend time with, and I'm talking about large corporations where the employee base is hundred thousands of more, is that there is a real fatigue in the modern day workforce. And so this idea that we can become our very best and at the same time be deeply fatigued, that they don't go hand in hand. So what we need to help people learn how to do, because when most people hear this push to the edge of instability, like, what are you talking about? I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
Like, why would I do that? I'm already there. No, that's not, fatigue is not it. Chronic fatigue is not what it's about. Let's use the physical frame for just a minute, and then we'll use emotions. There's no such thing as mental boundaries. Like, it's emotional, really, because thoughts drive emotions, but it's the emotional instability that we're more interested in. So on the world stage of elite athletics, everybody works hard, day in and day out. But we spend much more time on the science and art of recovery, because it is without question that we're going to work really hard today, as hard as a human can, but we're going to intelligently recover. And that's the part of the process that needs to get in place for so many of us, is how do we recover properly? Because when we get that balance right, the stress recovery balance, and we get that thing right, then we have the available resources to push aggressively to the places that we're unstable, where we're not sure that we have what it takes, because that's where rapid growth takes place. That's where it happens. That's where our brain is lit up. It is hungry for complexity, for novelty. It is hungry when it's most alive, trying to sort out, is this survival? No, it's not survival. This is a choice. And that's where we become so alive. And what happens, it's like a balloon, is that when we push to the edge of instability, the balloon expands. And then when it retracts, it doesn't retract all the way back to its original form, but there's more space in between. And then we push again, and then we retract, and push again, and it retracts. And over time, that balloon is stretched out so far that what looks extraordinary to the rest of us, or from the rest of us, that person who's been pushing on the edge of their boundaries on a regular basis, they're just playing. Like Alex Honnold just did a free climb. He's a free climber, and without rope, he just climbed El Capitan, thousands of feet without a rope. And most people look at him and say, that's crazy. He can't love his mother. That's not something that a normal person would do. No, that's wrong. People that push on the boundaries of instability become masterful because they figure out how to play. Over this long duration of time of pushing to the boundaries, they've got more available space to play, and they've understood the balance between recovery and stress, and then they have therein the freedom to push to the places where they grow the most in accelerated ways. And that's emotional instability and physical instability.
Now, Michael, the podcast that you host is called Finding Mastery, and you've talked about mastery. You used that word a couple times here in our conversation, and I'd love to know exactly, what do you mean by it? What's mastery?
Well, okay, so most people, I think, when I first started down the journey, I was more interested in trying to find out how these extraordinary men and women think. What is their psychological framework? How have they become so skilled at their craft? And it's just been apparent from these the series of conversations I've been able to have is that there's two forms of mastery: mastery of craft and mastery of self. And most people don't get the order right initially, and they work on mastering a craft first, and then they realize when they get to a certain level, of proficiency, that what's left to explore is mastery of self. So what is mastery? My working definition right now is the ability to play in the nuances of a craft, the ability to understand the space between. And that's either the space between thoughts, the space between breath, the space between whatever actions that they're taking in their craft. So people that are masterful are able to play in the frames and the spaces that the, let's call, average person is not even able to see. And so it looks like they're doing something magical, but it's not. It's just that they've spent so much time invested in understanding the nuances, and they push to the edge of instability, both through vulnerability and physical exhaustion, that they can play in places where most people are just trying to survive.
And then one final question, Michael. You mentioned that there are three things we can train in: our craft, our body, our mind, and then maybe this fourth, spirit, that there's some type of spiritual presence or training that we can bring to our lives that might even increase our mastery. And you put an asterisk, like that's out there someplace, but let's just bring it right here. What do you sense that might mean?
Well, so I personally believe that there is so much more to this world that we can't understand. And the intangible nature of that is wonderful, and it is amazing. And if I am personally a believer in God, and that there is something that is unexplainable, and it's amazing. So, what is the spiritual frame that I'm talking about? Is that it is part of how we make sense of the world, but it goes far deeper than that. It's the process and the path of meaning and purpose. And that can certainly fall squarely in a psychological frame, like a mental frame. But the spiritual sense of it has something to do far greater than the time that we have here, that there's something else that happens. There's that quality of the humanness that is different than thought and physical form, and that there's something else. And I think many people would say, well, yeah, that's the observer. Well, where is that? Is that the mind? Is that the spiritual side? I don't know. I'm on a journey to understand it. And I've been a student of world religions, and to understand how some of the most influential thinkers of the world have shaped culture in the way that we currently think now. Jesus, Buddha, Confucius, like Muhammad, like how have they organized their thoughts? And I don't know. I don't know the answer. And I'm working. I wish I did. I don't know anyone that does. And those that say they do scare me a little bit. And so that's what I'm trying to sort out myself.
Mm-hmm. It's been so interesting talking to you, because I notice when you talk about high performance and pushing our edge to the place of instability, I feel excited and turned on. It doesn't feel to me like some kind of motivational ego trip, if you will, where mindfulness is being used to push some personal separate self agenda, which is my fear sometimes with this high performance stuff. I'm going to be a better, richer me. It feels somehow like coming into the fullness of life.
Yeah, good. Yeah, good. Yeah, I think that's the, living in the amphitheater of people that are extraordinary at what they do. There is at least two parts of that. One part is it is amazing to be around people that are hungry for growth and have the vulnerability and fortitude to get on the edge. That's really inspiring. And to see someone be masterful at what they do is beautiful. There's also a hollowness if we're not careful. And there's a self-aggrandized, narcissistic abuse of microphones and television, cameras that don't help the world be better. And so, not that it's anyone's job necessarily to have to help the world be better, but I think we are here as creatures that are somehow deeply connected to each other, and the relationships that we have matter. Through relationships, we become relationships with ourselves, relationship with nature, with God, with others, with our craft, with success, with failures. We become. And so I thank you for that, because I'm still trying to figure it out, and I love the people that nod their head and say the same.
Michael Gervais, thank you so much for taking a break from the Seattle Seahawks football field and training world to come join us here for the Mindfulness and Meditation Summit. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
This concludes our session with Michael Gervais for our Mindfulness and Meditation Summit. We have sessions broadcasting at noon, 4 p.m., and 8 p.m. Eastern Time each day. Please join us for our next session. And to view